Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Utah-based author and speaker C.J. Lawson. He is a young author of teen and YA fiction. He is also an award-winning speaker and writer. His series is called the Maverick Trilogy, and it is about people who make mistakes while trying to do the right thing. His works usually take place in the modern day and have some supernatural elements. He firmly believes stories should inspire hope. He has big plans, along with penning his third novel at this point. They are all self-published, and he's looking to keep on rising up that literary ladder. Enjoy this interview.
Hey, CJ.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Joe Dimino, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me too, man. Hey, so where are you coming out of?
I'm in a suburb around Salt Lake City.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I'm here in Kansas City. I went to a wedding in Colorado, and I went right across the top of Utah. Didn't see much, but I did see some really interesting mountain formations that look like melted wax that I'd never seen before. So it was pretty scenic.
Yeah, the mountains here are really beautiful.
Yeah, it's good looking. Well, hey, man, thanks for taking a minute out. And I want to dive in first and foremost. You know, writing is a relatively solitary kind of activity. So as far as COVID's concerned, I'm curious how it affected the way that you wrote, that you promoted what you do. I mean, obviously you have to promote to get people to buy your books, but how did COVID change you? How did it change the way you see the world?
It's actually really kind of an interesting story. So I'm still kind of up and coming, and my first book was actually published during the pandemic. So for me, it's almost, I'd have to kind of flip the question, like, things have changed now coming out of COVID, and I can do a lot more, and it's a lot more exciting. But I did start out in the pandemic, and so it was a very different, starting journey. I couldn't do, like, live events or anything, and so there was no one to tell me exactly how to do the book launch, how to do the first book, because it was coming out in the pandemic. But now that we're getting out, I can start doing more exciting and different things. So it was almost like the pandemic. You couldn't do as much, so it was like the training wheels, and now that we're getting out of that and we can do bigger events, I have one coming up. It's like the training wheels are coming off now. So
that's good. It's a silver lining, and I think I've noticed that with people talking about the pandemic. It's like there was a lot of woe that went into this, but I think there's also levels of this. It all depended on how you approached it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you're a young author. How old are you exactly?
I am 21 now.
Okay. And a lot of people, even by that age, aren't quite sure what they're going to do with their lives unless they've just had their eyes on something from the word go. So what made you so motivated to get to a point where you said, you know what, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be published, this is going to be the life I'm going to live?
So it started out in elementary school, and there was actually a friend of mine who was already writing. They had this script for, a movie that they wanted to make. And they were telling me about it. They were so excited about it. And I love the idea that he just created this story all on his own, because I've always liked story. Didn't quite like reading for a little while. But when he told me about this story, I was so interested with this idea that he made it up all on his own that I had this idea in my head of like a sequel to his movie. And I just started writing that. And it was so kind of overwhelming that I didn't even ask his permission at first. I just, I had to start writing it out. And then, I asked his permission. He was definitely on board. But it was just, I think that's how I knew that I wanted to be a writer, because I had that passion come over me, and I'm a very usually reserved person, and I couldn't stop. And I've had that a lot of other times with writing, of like, I just have to go out and do something. Whereas, in anything else, I'm, a little quieter, more reserved. I'm not outgoing, but as an author, I try to be, and in some cases, I think I am.
The one thing that's very influential on the way that we approach art and view the world is what we've experienced with art and literature. What was it for you? What book did you read, the first one that really parted the curtains, that made you think, man, this is amazing?
And so I didn't really like reading through school, and then in 7th grade, our teacher had gotten permission to read a book from a modern author. He's still alive, he's still writing, he's my favorite author. And it was his book, Neil Shusterman's Unwind, which was just such a creative and different take. I would say beforehand, I didn't like reading, and it felt like that book was written for for me almost that it was a book for people who don't like to read. And so that's what I try to do with my writing now is like, I didn't like to read, but it was because I hadn't found the right book yet. And that book was just it for me. And since then I've, gone off, and reading is something that I try to do at least every day. And it just, there are books out there for people. It's just, you need to find the right one. And for me, it was Neil Shusterman's Unwind.
Other than writing, what else do you do? What is it that inspires you? What is it that you feel as though kind of feeds into your experience to make your voice that much stronger and richer for the words that you write?
So something that I like to do in my writing is I like to have the perspective switch between characters. And like you said, it really, I think, enhances the story. But with other things that I've done, I work a lot with communities who have autism. And they have such a unique and fascinating perspective on life. And when they're happy, there's no conditions at all. It's just such a joy that I love to see and I want to portray in writing. The smile on their faces is incredible to see, and very rewarding work that I get to do.
It's interesting you say that to me specifically. My son is 17 and he's on the autism spectrum, so I've lived in that world for a long, long time, and I get that. I totally get that, especially with him being a teenager. I have a stepdaughter who's 16, and his name's Miles. Like, there's things that happen in the world and in your regular high school brain that doesn't even come into his world. Like, there's a level of simplicity and joy that is just totally different from what you would see otherwise. So I'm curious, what is it about in your past or your history or life that made you, get involved with the autism community?
It's interesting that you bring up your own son, because what I'm learning is I always thought autism was something that's like sort of pushed aside. It's not out in the open. I don't have any relatives who are autistic, but my father loved working with the community, and it just sort of was on days that he wasn't, that I didn't have school, that I could sometimes go with him to the care centers, and I loved working or just being around those people, and so that got me interested. But as I've sort of come out and I've talked about how I work with communities with autism, I'm surprised at just how many people have a connection, and especially like a so close connection to people with autism, that it's really, I'm surprised that it hasn't come out more in, literature or just in discussion, because it really is more prevalent than I would have thought it was. Even after I started working, there was another podcast I was on a little while ago, and the same thing, his son had autism as well. So it's just incredible how it's out there, but it's not talked about. And so that's something that I'm hopefully going to be able to do with some of my writing.
Well, I got to commend you, man. I know for, Miles, there's a lot of camps and a lot of things. I'm very involved in his life, and there's been a lot of adventures that he's been involved with in his life where there's been volunteers, and he really embraces people, and they've embraced him. So I commend you for getting out there and doing that, because from firsthand being very involved in this community, it's very essential, and there is an unbridled joy that goes into that. And, the interesting thing that I will say about, statistically speaking, when it comes to the autism spectrum, like, Miles doesn't have autism. What he has is an extra long arm on his 15th chromosome, which leads to developmental delays. And I've known about that since he was 15 months old, when he couldn't sit up, and there was basic things he couldn't do, couldn't talk. There was a lot of things. But I remember at that point, which would have been around 2005 or 6, he was born in 2004, the stats for the autism spectrum was around 1 in maybe a few thousand babies would have it. By the time he got to be like 7 or 8 years old, it went to like 1 in like 70. So the stats for it, which is what you're saying, is staggering. Mm-hmm. The amount of families and people that are affected by not only autism, but the spectrum is massive. And maybe it's just because I'm so immersed in this environment. I feel it and hear it and try to get involved. But still, I mean, in the early days, I had to get on Yahoo listservs, and there was different things that were archaic. It wasn't out there in the open, and I guess that leads to services and different things. So it's interesting from your perspective, working in that you don't hear more about it, because we really should.
Sometimes, when we're out in the community, I have to explain it to them, but in recent years, it's gotten a lot better, I'd say. People recognizing it and, being happy, especially at seeing them. Because some of the kids that I've worked with have done incredible things. And, to see them out there, brings a smile to everyone's face. So yeah. I just think that anyone who has a kid with autism and, is so involved in their life, the parents are just like a different breed. You guys are so incredible. So
he's awesome. And that's the thing. I think the way that I view this world since I've had Miles in my life is drastically different. I mean, I go to a depth of things and see things in a way that's totally different. In fact, he's 17, and his favorite place to go to is, we have a theme park here in Kansas City called World of Fun, and it's therapy for him. I mean, when everybody's on a roller coaster and they're all like jagging around, I sit behind him and watch him, and it's like his world is centered. Like he is in a comfort place. So I just kind of went out on a limb because he's old enough, and long story short, he got his first job there, and he started his job last week, and he absolutely loves it. And I can see how the employees around him embrace him, and it's just kind of this new world for him, kind of feeling like he belongs, because he can't drive and do certain things that people in his age group can. But now he has a badge, he can do it, so it's cool. Those little things that happen are really cool to see, and they're definitely milestones. So you use it as a kind of a layer of your writing. Is that what you're saying? Kind of the autism community?
Yeah. So when I first started writing, I still wasn't involved with the community, but now, not my published work, but the stuff that I'm writing now, I'm trying to lean more into that. And with one of my next projects, I want to try to have the main character who has autism. With the published work, where it has affected that is each kid can have like a completely different perspective. And so I try to recognize, how would someone else see this, or, lean into just, there's so many different ways to interpret events. And I try to embrace all of those. I try to embrace, the people who would see this as a heroic event, as well as people who would see this as, more of a morally gray zone. And I try to embrace, so the characters, one would view it as the right thing, one would view it as the wrong thing, and they just see that creates conflict in itself, which is a really interesting part of the story that I've been writing.
Did you have any other dreams of what you wanted to do with your life? I know you're a writer, and that's a big dream. I mean, that right there,
yeah.
Getting into that's huge. But was there anything else when you were growing up, like wanting to be a firefighter or a cop, or was there anything else?
No, I wasn't too much of the adventurous type, and once I found writing, I really clung to it. But I would love to do any sort of thing that involves storytelling. I've looked at, maybe going into movies or shows at some point. I did for a little while, thought about doing acting, but I didn't quite have the personality for acting. And then music as well is something I've done a little bit of. I can't really play the piano. I can read the notes and play the notes, but I can't play the music. But I have done some like choral singing, which is a lot of fun, and it's something I don't know if I'd ever do it professionally, but it's something that was definitely a major part of my teenage years, and something that I look back on fondly.
So who would you consider a role model or a hero for you? I mean, we're only as good sometimes as those that we admire and look up to and aspire to. Who's been that for you?
I'm going to go back to Neal Shusterman, my favorite author. I just love his attitude on writing, and the stories he writes are exactly what I want to be. It was when I was reading him that I realized that I wanted to do this for a living. Before then, I was writing because it was something fun to do, but reading his work and seeing where he's at now made me realize that I could do this for a living, and I want to do it for a living. So I would go for sure Neal Shusterman.
What about one person that's alive today on the planet? If you could meet him, who would it be?
Well, I have my bucket list is to meet Neal Shusterman, as well as Marie Lu, who's another author, same genre, who I just really love her writing. So that's my bucket list, is to meet the two of them. I have been involved in a mentorship program with another author, Richard Paul Evans, who's just been phenomenal. And I have met him, so I can't quite say him, but definitely meeting him was one of those moments like, oh, wow, it's finally happening. So I've had that, and I want to have that experience again with Neal Shusterman and Marie Lu.
Let's say we catch up in 10 years from now. Okay, you just passed 30, and I'm curious, what are you looking forward to seeing happen in your life? I mean, I know you're working on a new book, but, are you looking forward to moving? Are you looking forward to diversify yourself? What are you looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to seeing where the stuff that I'm working on right now, where that's going to be, and hopefully I'd like to get in. I'm self-published right now, but I've been looking at some agents with some other projects that I have. But I think what would be most exciting is seeing what else I've come up with since then, because the trilogy that I'm working on right now, the third book is just about to come out, and that was my childhood, early teenage dream finally realized. And then the project after that I thought was even better, even more exciting. And then the project that I'm working on right now, and I'm getting close to finishing the rough draft of that, I think is just such a cool, I think it could really be a big deal. And so that makes me think, okay, what's going to happen next after that? And just seeing what ideas keep coming, because I don't think I'm going to stop coming up with ideas. At least I hope not. And it'll be exciting, and I think it'll really spark my passion to see what else happens and where all it can go.
So up to this point, what's been the best fan letter or response that you've gotten from somebody?
So I was kind of very isolated. I was always the quiet kid in school. And so a lot of my friends or mentors, or my friends were teachers, essentially. I did have a couple of friends about my age. But I remember the day that my book was published. We were in the middle of the pandemic, so there was no big fanfare. I was actually home alone, and I just felt like I needed to write letters. It was something that I thought about for a while. I wanted to write letters to all the people who I felt I just needed to say thank you to. A lot of them were teachers, friends, family, friends. As I was writing them, I would send them off they were all email, and I would send them off. And as I was still writing, I was getting responses back from people. They were saying, nice things. They were so proud of me, but it was just kind of a realization that, like, the quiet, that they all saw me as something more than what I saw myself during those times. The quiet, the shy, the not very ambitious kid, but they all saw me as what I could have been in this author, even then. And it was just a theme which was present throughout so many of the letters that I got from them. And that's just, I still have those letters. I keep them in a printed document, and they're my inspiration whenever I'm feeling down or feeling at a loss. So just the letters, it's not even what was said necessarily, but just knowing who was behind those letters and what they really thought of me and knew that I could do. So.
You had mentioned that you were into music, and I'm curious what musicians you really enjoy, somebody that you really come back to and listen to on a regular basis.
I have kind of a weird music taste. I love a group called Audio Machine. They sort of do like movie trailer music. That's kind of what they've done, but they've also done like the triumphant music that you hear in like the Olympics. And it's stuff that I can like envision happening in, like the writing or the I think they call it the mind movie, when you're writing and you see things playing out. It's music that I could see happening or, playing out to those events.
So you had mentioned, people seeing you in a certain way and you see yourself in a certain way. And that's a great lead in to this question, which is everyone has a perception of you. Your family, your friends, those that buy your books, your fans, those that you speak to. But ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm really hard on myself. I know I've published, at this point, 2 books. I'm trying to get the third one out, but I don't really view myself as, I still have a hard time seeing myself as the author. And, I make excuses of like, it's self-published. It doesn't take as much. Or, I worry about the quality of my writing a lot. And so I'm really hard on myself, but I try to keep a positive outlook when I can, and I try to, in my writing as well. When I first started, I wanted to be, more gray, negative, but just as I grew up, I think so did my writing, and I realized that even though there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of, depression sometimes, if we can keep a positive outlook overall, that things work themselves out. And so I've kind of been going through a negative swing lately, and so that's why there's a little more bleak. But I view myself as someone who gets up after falling down, even though I know I'm going to fall down again and again. I think that's what really matters in writing, the main passion.
Yeah, well said, man. So if anybody wants to learn about you and to pick up your books and anything related to your world, where is the best place on the web for them to go?
It would be my website through MailChimp, or you can find my books on Amazon. It's the Maverick Trilogy by C.J. Lawson.
Cool. CJ, man, hey, thank you for taking some time out. This is wonderful. I always really enjoy talking to the youth in the world that really are motivated and going out there and doing it. It's huge. And, I'm going to be 50 this year, so when I look back in my rearview mirror and I think about, what's possible, it's so great that you're grabbing this, you're living your dreams. So, yeah, man, keep your chin up. You got a great perspective on things. And, again, I really genuinely appreciate what you're doing for these kids out there on the spectrum that need really good, solid people in their lives.
Well, thank you. These interviews always make my day and send me up out of the negative spiral, so thank you a lot.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.